All right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Truth Seeking Thursday with Jay Young here and Greg Dowd. And tonight, the topic is going to be focused on the World Council of Churches and the origin of it. And so we're going to look into that as the topic. And before we get started, Jay, how's it been going, man?
Life's good. I'm in Birmingham right now, so I'm sure everyone has noticed my background is a little different. I am attending a kind of a political function tomorrow. It's all day, and my primary function is that of tech support. So audio, video equipment, running the laptops for the presentations, etc. They're important issues that they're covering with this, and I think just about everyone in this audience would, appreciate the issues for sure. It's just I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm not even. I guess I'm saturated with politics, and I'm just not interested in some of these events anymore, even though they are important. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on right now. I know there's like this whole stir up in the conservative movement, and then there's MTG. I think recently said she was stepping out of Congress. There's a lot of stuff going on, and a lot of stuff after the Charlie Kirk assassination that's been going down in TPUSA and all that kind of stuff. I was just listening to Candace Owens recently, and the stuff that she's been putting out there about the state of Israel and everything like that, and calling for war with everybody. And
did she have an announcement literally in the past 2 or 3 days?
She did, saying that the French, she had suspicion of a credible threat on her life or whatever.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah,
that might be tied to the French government. So,
well, Macron and his wife are not too happy with her right now. So I would not be surprised if there's some sort of tie there.
Yeah, yes, it's pretty wild times, and yeah, it's one of those things that I realized a long time ago was that the best thing that we don't have a whole ton of control over what happens, especially on the national level when it comes to politics and those things. But what you do have influence over is yourself, and you can control what you do, and you can work on improving yourself and getting into a position where you don't have to rely on the system as much.
Yeah,
and if you can focus on those things, I think you'll be a lot better off than sinking your time into politics.
Yeah, I think that's well said. If I'm reading you correctly, it's we need to prioritize our time and taking action of the things that we can control, things that are within arm's reach, are probably where we are best served.
Yeah, I think so. And that, in my opinion, I think if you spend the time to increase your personal skills and just we're thinking about how you could serve others and serve the people around you best by offering value to people, by the skills that you've attained and things that you can do in an entrepreneurial effort. I think a lot of our world, we pre-show we talked a little bit about people being producers and having a lack of producers in the economy. That if you eventually run out of people that are producing goods and services, then you have no economy. So that's really a big. I think you could do a lot more with your wallet and where your money goes than other efforts like politics. And if you can figure out how to provide value to others, that's going to be a lot better. lot better off and make you a more resilient person.
If I could take just a quick tangent on that, and if I could get a little nerdy for just a moment, I think we talked about this last episode where I'm trying to transition over from Windows, the Microsoft Windows environment, to Linux, and the laptop I'm using right now, I converted that over to a Linux laptop, and so it has been really nice, not having all this bloatware and spyware on there, and the processors, they just sip electricity. They barely do anything. They may spike for a minute as I'm running some program or installation, and they go right back down to 1%. And I've been thinking about putting together some sort of presentation, maybe a 30-minute presentation for trying to show people what Microsoft is doing through Windows 11, through bloatware, spyware, this other thing called Linux, and then trying to put together some live documents that could help lower the barrier to entry to help people move over to Linux if they have the inclination to do so. And so that's not something I would charge for, right? It's just, for me, this is so important that people, that I help them spit themselves out or eject out of the matrix, right? And so it's funny you're saying this, and this is something I'm thinking about doing, and hopefully I can do for our group that you and I are part of, and some other groups that I'm a part of in the area where we live. So maybe can be my contribution.
Yeah, that'd be excellent. I know so many people are, I'm broadcasting from Windows right now, so yeah. If I could get this thing loaded up with Linux and get everything migrated over, I'd love to do that. So
yep.
So I know I know all the stuff that Windows is doing is spying on you, basically, especially with Windows 11. And then you throw in some updates in there, and then you got something important that you're trying to do, and it crashes everything, and you're in a sinking boat. So yeah, it is really important to see if you can migrate away from Windows, for sure.
Yeah. For those who want to do a quick test, in Windows, the Windows environment, you had Task Manager. Just pull up Task Manager and look at all these different apps and programs that are running all the time, and they're sucking up an inordinate amount of memory and CPU cycles. And then you can do a contrast comparison with the Task Manager version of Linux. And if anyone wants, I'm happy to take screenshots to show everyone an A/B comparison there. And it just sips electrons. It barely moves the needle, and there's no bloatware or anything like that. And it may have several dozen apps open, but 99% of them are on suspend/zombie mode, And I really appreciate that level of detail that they put in the Linux environments or distributions. And they really try to get everything pared down to the absolute bare minimum.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. I know I booted Linux on one of my old desktops, and it's lightning difference in speed, and you got an old desktop or something like that. You boot Linux on it, wipe Windows, just boot Linux on it. Man, you got a brand new desktop there.
That's right. And that was one of I realize we're kind of going off on a tangent here for the audience, but that was one thing that really attracted me to Linux. Is a buddy of mine from several years ago kept telling me you can run Linux on a toaster. And, it's just the whole idea of what you just talked about, Greg, where you can get an older piece of equipment and you put Linux on it and it's just going to run, right? It doesn't need all the stuff. And with Windows 11, Microsoft required you have to have a TPM, Trusted Platform Module. It's a special chip that is being put on some of the new equipment. And basically that allows Microsoft to track that piece of equipment, that laptop or desktop, to a specific user, and it basically de-anonymizes the user. And if that TPM chip is not in there on that new equipment, then if I'm not mistaken, they will not allow you to migrate from Windows 10 to Windows 11, And so for the people who want to stay on Windows 11, which is fine, it doesn't bother me, they basically have to engage in e-waste. They have to basically effectively trash some equipment that's perfectly fine. You put Linux on there and you've recycled it, and because it just barely sips electrons, it's going to be fine. It's going to run cleanly, and you won't have all that garbage running in the background, and you will basically have a brand new computer.
Yeah, I think with what a lot of these guys are doing, they're like inadvertently putting themselves in a tough situation, because people aren't stupid. After a while, people figure stuff out, and
that's right.
People are going to figure out ways on how to have their own PCs without being bogged down or getting put into a position where they're not going to be useful anymore. So, I mean, people are going to figure it out eventually.
There's been an explosion on YouTube of videos of why we should not use Windows 11, and then videos of why we ought to switch over to Linux. And here's how you do it. And they do an A/B comparison, and these videos are becoming very popular. And I think that you're right that Microsoft is basically shooting themselves in the foot by doing this, and the market is reacting. And thank goodness for tools such as YouTube and Rumble and MetaCafe, right? These are just open source tools that anyone can access and just recreate these new systems.
Yep, absolutely, man. So, yeah, don't get trapped in the learned helplessness cycle. There's always a solution. It's not just trolley. It's not just the trolley problem, man. Like,
that's right. Well done. Take the red pill. Consider taking the red pill.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, topic tonight: World Council of Churches. What is the World Council of Churches, and what is its influence on us in the today's churches, and how is it being used towards the overall steering of society? So I have a clip from the Grand Theft World podcast here pulled up, and it goes pretty deep. It's pretty interesting on its origins and how it relates to all the people involved, and the overall world in general. So we'll listen to some of this, and we'll pull probably pull up some sources along the way, and kind of dive in here.
Was Angleton's dad. Angleton's dad was like a spook over in Italy in the first place, right? So Angleton is second generation. He was trained in London. He used to speak with a British accent. So he's the Anglo-American and the American-Israeli mole in our intelligence organization for decades. So they got NCR. Dulles was a Princeton graduate and the senior partner to Wall Street firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, which represented the Rockefeller Empire and funded the Nazis and other mammoth trusts and cartels. He was also a board member of the J. Henry Schrödinger Bank, with offices in Wall Street, London, Zurich, and Hamburg, because it's a German bank, Schroeder Bank.
Schroeder Bank is Dulles is involved in that, and I think it's page 1049 or 59 of Tragedy and Hope. That funds Hitler.
Yeah, I pronounced it wrong the first time, but it's the Schroeder Bank of New York. While Bill Donovan was an Ivy League lawyer, and he had married Ruth Ramsey, the heiress of one of the richest families in America. That's how he got his job. Donovan justified the practice of recruiting the social elite for the OSS by saying, you can hire a second-story man and make him into a better second-story man, but if you hire a lawyer or an investment banker or a professor, you'll have something else besides. So when Hallowell, who was not a second-story man, communicated his idea to the OSS brass, he was assured of a captive audience. Donovan, Angleton, and Dulles viewed Hallowell's proposal as an answered prayer. Selling SPAC to the black jazz subculture would provide the U.S. intelligence community with a steady supply of revenue for gladio work throughout the post-war era. So these are proxy armies that they can fight, not in the name of a war in the United States, but just for overthrowing countries and taking their stuff for corporations that are international after World War II. and cold cash, Donovan knew, would become the key weapon of the new agency. He remained hell-bent on establishing as soon as he got back to Washington. And then here's the C.T. Jackson tie-in, because he worked for Henry Luce. Henry Luce was Skull and Bones.
Mhm.
Skull and Bones was 1832 when they privatized the opium syndicate. They opened it up to privateers, and that's Yale, the East India Company's installment in America, the opium monopoly of the world. They got privateering license, and that's where the money for Skull and Bones comes
Let's
from.
not forget
Legacy
Jackson
Defense
is
Yes.
psychological warfare. And then, it's almost like whether it was part of Operation Mockingbird or if it was just an analog to that, he then goes and becomes an executive of Time Life by the late 1950s.
Well, really important as well in regard to the Roman Catholic Church that we were just talking about, the Vatican, is that C.D. Jackson's the brains behind the doctrinal warfare program, which when they recruited John Courtney Murray, the famous Jesuit, his job was to be the point man with the CIA amongst the Jesuits to make sure that the Vatican II documents went along with what the
Really?
CIA.
Wait, he's one of the foundational elements of Vatican II, like in those documents and like those sort of.
C.D.
the
Jackson is the architect
No
of the
way. I did not
doctrinal
know
warfare.
that.
It's called the Doctrinal Warfare Program, which was the way that the CIA would ensure that the Vatican would be aligned with the CIA for the rest of the Cold War, and which is basically
And
why
it sort of
the
opens up
Vatican-
the secular liberalism, Vatican II, as far as a dogma is concerned.
Yeah,
And that's-
David Wimhoff's book is crucial on
That's
this.
fascinating. So he's all over the place on C.D. Jackson. Okay, I mean, I
Absolutely.
knew he was all over the place, but I didn't realize he had that sort of influence even over in Italy.
Well,
And
he's
going back-
somebody's Renfield. We know whose Renfield he is.
Oh, sure.
Henry Luce and Nelson Rockefeller's. I mean, it's so Henry. Here's the quote, and then we'll finish up from page 33. Henry Luce, the founder of Time Life Empire, argued that America was the rightful heir to Great Britain's international primacy and heralded the post-war era as the American century. To justify their entanglement in foreign adventures, American Cold Warriors embraced a militarily anti-communist ideology. In their minds, the entire world was locked in a Manichaean struggle between godless communism and the free world. And the point I want to make about that is that the handlers of all those people that we just talked about, their handlers in the layer above, they come up with this idea to use international communism as a fulcrum in the 20th century. So the robber barons go into
Yes.
Russia, into China. They build up all the infrastructure so Mao and Stalin can do all the things they do. They
Yep.
build the railroads, they give them the industry, and they provide vehicles, all this sort of stuff. And then when the communism sprouts up, oh, they had a revolution over there. Oh, look what they're doing. So in that country, it's wealth reappropriation for the leaders of that country who don't follow communistic rules. And it's the excuse for the Westerners who funded it in the first place to go, we got to go do regime change
Who are
because they got communism.
Who are ideologically set
It's like
by-
firing on both pistons, their whole strategy. I mean, it's very elegant.
But that's
It's just
Hegelian.
evil.
That's
Yeah.
fundamentally Hegelian.
That's why they.
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. They keep referring to it as Manichaean because of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Brzezinski speaks of it that way, and I don't think they're just speaking in a colloquial way. I think they really understand that the management of the dialectic operates in precisely this way. Can you, if I text you something here, can you put this book up because it's really important for what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Or is that? Can I text it on? Is there a
You
chat?
text it to me, and I'll text it to Control Room.
I'm gonna pause it there just for a
Yeah.
second. And
Yeah.
this idea that they were talking about of Manichaeanism is really interesting, and it was a term that I was not familiar with when getting into this earlier in the week. But it's really interesting idea here. It comes from this guy Mani, and was a major world religion founded in the 3rd century CE by the Parthian Iranian prophet Mani in the Sansarian Empire, variably described as a Christian heresy and a Gnostic movement. Manichaeanism was an organized and doctrinal religious tradition in its own right, and taught to elaborate the dualistic cosmology, describing the struggle between a good spiritual world of light and an evil material world of darkness. So through an ongoing process in human history, light is gradually removed from the world of matter and returned to the world of the divine. So it's pretty interesting, and it goes on to talk about Mani's teachings were intended to integrate, succeed, and surpass the partial truths of various prior faiths and belief systems, including Platonism, Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, Marcionism, Hellenistic and Rabbinic Judaism, Gnosticism, ancient Greek religion, Babylonian religion, other ancient Mesopotamian religions, and Greco-Roman mysteries. Some forms of Manichaeism viewed Mani as the final prophet after Zoroaster, the Buddha, and Jesus. So it's kind of gets into this kind of idea of kind of like a blend of all the major world religions, and playing off this idea of the battle between light and dark. And what they were talking about there in the show was kind of like the whole communists being propped up by the industrialists in the United States, and actually creating an enemy that would cause a perpetual fight between good and evil, creating, the bad guy in the communists, while also supporting the other side, which was the fascists in Germany, at the same time. So creating this duality, and an enemy to continue fighting after they fought the Germans in World War II. So a way to kind of create a perpetual kind of warfare system. And they were talking about how, the folks that were behind all that kind of understood the interplay between, that good and evil, and creating a boogeyman, basically.
It's interesting. I think you've done a good job of really tying a lot of this together. And if we think about it, so many times this is the mechanism that governments use, is they manufacture a problem and then they say, and we have the cure for it. And that's kind of, I think, what one of the hosts, talked about when he's kind of reading through that passage. And I think you touched on that as well in your summary. And this is what happens when we allow centralized powers, especially nation states, to have too much centralized power. When it's not distributed to the people where it should be, and they become so self-serving that they'll use our money, they'll use our efforts to create problems that only they can solve, and then tell us we have to pay more, we have to do more, we have to sacrifice more for the causes that they say are worthy, for fighting. And if you think about it, is that any different than a racketeering scheme from the mob? It's like, you need our protection. And then when a person doesn't pay for the protection services, they break the person's legs and say, see, you didn't pay for protection services, and your leg got broken. This is why you have to pay us, because we'll protect you from getting your leg broken. And so is that really any different than how mobs work, or La Cosa Nostra?
No. I mean, yeah, when you break it down, it basically is a mafia. Is organized crime.
Yeah.
If
I could, another thing that I appreciate that these gentlemen brought up was Wild Bill Donovan. He has legend status in OSS along with Aaron Bank. Aaron Bank, if I'm not mistaken, was in OSS, and out of that, he created the First Special Forces Group. And so this is not meant to be an indictment of Special Forces or the Green Berets, but the point is there's that common root experience, that root founding right there. And if we think about it, SF does a lot in terms of social engineering when it comes to FID, foreign internal defense, and UW, unconventional warfare. and some of the tools that they use are psychological warfare and black ops. Again, not an indictment of special forces, but they came from that common ground of OSS.
Yeah. And, a lot of what these guys do is a lot about, how we think about things and how your perception is shaped. So,
one more thing, the British analog to OSS, I believe, was SEO, Strategic Executive Office, or SOE, Strategic Office Executive. I apologize for not getting that exactly right, but if I remember correctly, the SOE or SEO answered directly to Churchill, and they were not exactly the same as OSS, but their mission was very similar in the sense that these are strategic services that they performed. And, if I'm not mistaken, I think MI5 and MI6 were sprung out of SEO.
So what did that stand for? Strategic.
It's either Strategic Executive Office or Strategic Office Executive. But just type in World War II SEO or World War II SOE. Another, while you're looking that up for the audience, also look up the American Counterintelligence Corps. There were a lot of people, not a lot, there were some people who kind of worked in both the American OSS and the Counterintelligence Corps. If I remember correctly, Kissinger worked for OSS, I think. And basically the Counterintelligence Corps was there to be able to find intelligence, access intelligence sources and either remove them or turn them into double agents. So there was a lot of parallels there between Counterintelligence Corps, CIC, and OSS. You need the same type of mentality of people who could do that and people who are not directly involved in combat. Yeah, Special Operations Executive. There it is. Special Operations Executive. Yeah. And, I want to give credit where credit's due. At a minimum, SOE and OSS and CIC, if they didn't outright win the war, they did a lot to save Allied lives and save Axis lives, because by ending the war much sooner. There were, and many of there were estimates that Allied forces were going to have to go into Japan in 1945, and it was going to be a really long, hard, and bloody slog through Japan and Okinawa. And, I think that the SOE, OSS, and CIC, from what I understand about them, they all did a really good job of pressing the right buttons with that light touch and really tipping the strategic advantage to the Allies' side.
Yeah, the British, a lot of our stuff and intelligence and stuff like that, I know has its foundations with the British and what they did over the years. This is pretty interesting. SOE was formed the amalgamation of three existing secret departments, which had been formed shortly before the outbreak of the Second World War, immediately after Germany annexed Austria in March 1938. The Foreign Office reestablished a propaganda organization from the First World War known as the Department of Propaganda in Enemy Countries. In that earlier war, it had been known more commonly as Crew House, eponymously named after the building in which it operated. The present-day location of the embassy in Saudi Arabia of the Embassy of Saudi Arabia in London, and was directed by Viscount Northcliffe, directing section leaders such as figures such figures as H.G. Wells and Hamilton Fife. Yeah.
Yeah. So to just amplify something real quick with that is OSS and SOE, they did a really good job of actually hiring professionals from like Hollywood and theater directors, people who were actors, people who were experts in costumes and design. And I think Operation Mincemeat and Operation, I forget what, the one that basically gave Patton the fake army coming out of the UK right before the Normandy landings. Some of these people were responsible for creating entire stories and then the props necessary to make this stuff happen. And so I give SOE and OSS a lot of credit for really getting creative and getting experts in there to kind of be innovative and really tipping the tide of the war.
Well, this whole intelligence stuff comes up with and comes, into this whole World Council of Churches thing, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna get back into this clip here, and let me stop sharing that, and let's get back into this real quick.
Between the light and the darkness, good and evil, but sort of instantiate or superimpose it upon a Hegelian dialectic as though you're controlling history with these false dualisms. It's a really interesting element. I agree with you, Jay, that they didn't just see this in jest. It wasn't just a colloquialism to your point. It's something they had like a knowledge of historically, because they see themselves as controlling history, but they control history through these false dualisms, if you will. These
and I think some of these people are studied at a pretty high level when it comes to philosophy too, to understand.
I agree.
How even we know Marxism is based on Hegelianism, but
right.
It gets rid of the metaphysics and makes it materialism, and so they would understand that notion of dialectics is central to this control. And I don't just mean controlled opposition; I mean the metaphysics of dialectics.
Yeah.
If you would, Richard, that book there.
Yeah, I got it right here.
That's a more recent reprint. I have the older version, but that's a great book for the whole history of C.D. Jackson and his relationship to Henry Lewis and what exactly his job was with creating the doctrinal warfare program and basically making the Roman Catholic Church a tool of soft power. So a lot of what's going on in this book here. It's really, by the way, it's super sourced. There's like 800 footnotes, 800 pages, 800 footnotes. He's a lawyer.
Definitely have to look that up. I have to. That's
basically the
angle. I did not know about that. So appreciate that, Jay.
What Williams talks about with when the bank scams collapsed, they basically did a bailout model for the Vatican Bank. Guess who offered up the money? Take a few guesses.
J.P. Morgan.
Close.
Bank of England.
David Rockefeller.
Oh, well, that was a third guess. There you go.
Yeah. So David Rockefeller bails out the Vatican when all of the banks implode. The shells in the Vatican Bank scandal, when the shell companies implode.
They take turns, Jay. So like when the Bank of England was going out of business, the Rothschilds bailed that out. So they said when the Vatican Bank's going out, I
think it's like a regional model.
It's your turn,
Rockefeller.
It's your turn, Rockefeller. They took turns.
I got to copy this title. I'm adding this book to the brain.
As far as the shell companies, was that set up under what year was that, Jay? Was that when Gladio was getting started? Was this before 1972 and BCCI? Was this in the 70s? Talking about
the 70s and 80s were a lot of the shell. I think it collapsed in the 80s.
Okay.
So when Ambrosiano collapses, all of these collapse. Let me look at it. This is on page 146 and 47. If you want to look at it, but that chapter is on a lot of the shell banks. The Vatican shells they had 8 of them. Astrofine, SA, United Trading, Aaron SA, Bellatrix SA, Belrose SA. I don't know what they're called. SA, Starfield SA.
Those are like you know how in Britain a corporation is LTD. So
Oh,
Like
okay.
limited,
SA
yeah.
is like they have different abbreviations in countries. So that could be like a South American corporation, or it could be like Austria or someplace that I'm
I
not
see.
familiar with.
This is late 70s.
Okay, so it would have been under the BCCI, because the famous thing about BCCI is it operated with so many different shell companies, so many different branches of shells upon shell. That was, I remember we read.
That's the same stuff, same model, yeah.
Yeah, it's exact same model. We did a book club for One Nation Under Blackmail in chapter 7, the first volume. It's the biggest chapter. And all of us were dizzied just by the fact of her naming how many shell companies of shell companies of shell companies. And it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
I see how why it made it almost impossible to trace, not because it wasn't impossible to trace, because you had to go from this company, that company, that company, that company, before you find how the money was being essentially funneled, which creates essentially smokescreen, through 1,000 layers of complexity. I mean, it's just.
Some of these shells owned arms companies.
Yes.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
it's like the Vatican was running arms companies or owning them. And then guess who was putting their money in these Vatican shell banks? Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel.
You mean CIA clients were getting they were using their CIA clients were using their affiliate link for the Vatican Bank, and CIA was getting some commission off that.
Just for context, this comes from chapter 7, One Nation Under Blackmail. For people who are a little bit unfamiliar with BCCI, which you shouldn't be by now.
The Bank of Commerce and Credit International.
Jay Dyer or Grand Theft World, you know exactly Jay's analysis, what's going on. But here it says, while the conventional narrative presents BCCI as an enterprise whose origins lay in Pakistani Saudi networks of power, influence, and finance, there have also been allegations the bank's origins have involved the CIA. A 1992 report published in Newsweek cites an anonymous former officer of BCCI and its predecessor, United Bank, as well as a close associate of Abadi's. He's the one who supposedly started the bank, Hassan Abadi, who asserted that Abadi, quote, had worked with the CIA during his United Bank days and that the CIA had encouraged him in his project to launch BCCI since the agency realized that an international bank could provide valuable cover for intelligence operations, end quote. This same source specifically mentioned Richard Helms, CIA director from 1966 until 1973, as having been involved in the bank's creation. He told Newsweek, quote, what I've been told is that it wasn't a Pakistani bank at all. The guys weren't Pakistani at all. The whole thing was a front, end quote.
Yeah.
Okay, so whose front is it? If it's a Pakistani bank,
exactly.
It's the British
CIA.
MI6 front and the CIA hanging out with MI6. MI6
It sounds like it's managed by the CIA, and the British were the ones maybe gave up the model for it.
The way it's going on page 170, his section on it says that the guy that set it up was running drugs in the Golden Crescent, the Abidi guy. It goes on to say that along with funding and funneling money to Noriega, Nadal, Al Qaeda, and Bin Laden, and the Medellin cartel, prominent spooks, including William Casey.
Partners of CIA, yeah.
Prominent spooks. William Casey made regular visits to the BCCI headquarters in Karachi, making the Pakistani city the new haven for covert operations. The bank served the agency in a myriad of ways, paying bribes, providing young beauties, and funneling cash for assassins. The enormity of the bank's operations are evidenced by its transfer of $4 billion in covert aid to Iraq from 85 to 89. For the Iraq,
while they were fighting Iran, right?
Yeah.
With chemical weapons they got from Donald Rumsfeld.
The CIA gave the chemical weapons to.
And the Abadi guy looks like he was already part of those networks before it even thought of "quote unquote" starting a bank.
So here's what they're asking us to believe.
Check this out. Back to Kissinger, because for the Iraqi transfer, the BCCI made use of the Atlanta branch of the Banco Nazionale International, an Italian bank with ties to the IOR. I sat on the BNL board. So Henry Kissinger was on the bank that the BCCI would make use of, their Atlanta branch of the Banca Nazionale del Lavoro, an Italian bank in Atlanta that Henry Kissinger was on the board of, that would receive money from the BCCI. So again, Kissinger, I think, plays a really big role in organizing a lot of this stuff, like Brzezinski does.
Yeah,
sort of like an architect in a sense.
He seems like an architect to me.
Yeah. Well, and this is all in the circle of Operation Gladio, which is this notion that CIA and MI6 can train these other proxy armies and have them get up to no good. So as an example, the guy who's credited with creating BCCI, this shady character, why do all these intelligence agencies do their money laundering through him? Or do they need to launder money and this is their front guy that they chose? And when they need to give money to bin Laden and Al Qaeda and Noriega and the cartels, they use the front company. It's a shell company, and that's how they do it. And then in that same scenario, as they're doing that, here's what we need to know. Clark Clifford in 1947 is a lawyer, and he creates the National Security Act. And he's right here, Clark Clifford. And so that creates CIA. CIA is created after National Security Act. Clark Clifford, 40 years later, is one of the guys, the instrumental players in BCCI. So the overlaps between the Safari Club and Iran-Contra and the hostage crisis and all that sort of stuff, that was like, those are the people that killed Kennedy and got away with it, still doing these activities, but they're doing it at an even higher scale in the 70s and 80s and 90s until they started to get some pushback. And even the British were like, okay, we got to fold up BCCI. Right, because they're like, we have other Bermuda offshore places. They invented all that stuff, the trusts and the shell companies, and they learned it from the Vatican.
Yeah.
Right. So there's layers. Like the old school bureaucracy that the Vatican carries with it is not just religious; it's also civil. Like a lot of our society and all the laws and bureaucracies, they all come from the church back in the day, and then the king of England, they built on top of that. But there's like these layers to our society and the institutions around it. So tell me more, Jay.
No, you're spot on. I mean, this is a key point a lot of people miss. I'm really glad you hit that, because a lot of people think of the Vatican as a purely religious institution, but it's not. Even before the establishment of the Vatican as a city-state, you had the papal states for a long time. So it's kind of been its own independent state going back to when Rome collapsed, you could perhaps argue in the 400s. But
really argue the Constantine conversion, because there's a lot of interesting elements associated with that. I've heard different alternative histories associated with.
Well, but Constantine's conversion leads to the creation of Constantinople. So the center of orthodoxy is still that. But when he moved, that was in his lifetime. Rome fell to the Vandals in 400, and that's when Rome collapsed. There was a vacuum of state leadership in the West. So the Vatican stepped into that role, and they kind of took on more and more temporal power. And then you get, forget exactly what year it is, but then you get the establishment of the papal states. Interestingly, they used the forged document of the donation of Constantine to create exactly the idea that the papacy was it's also a state.
And owned a bunch of lands that they did or did.
The same way they created
kings had given them all these lands. It was all forgery. But this point, though, that you're making, Richard, so some of the intelligence and history writers will point out that the oldest living intelligence agency in the world is the Vatican. That's the oldest one that's still around. And you're right to point to this, not just strategy and technique of religious ruling, but also civil ruling and bureaucracy. For example, exactly. The history, like Machiavelli, a lot of that, if you get into, I'm doing a lot of studies in Renaissance stuff because we're taking a trip to Italy in like a month. So we're doing a whole like 2-week pilgrimage lecture tour thing in Italy. And I'm getting really into reading all these Renaissance characters and their machinations, because there's a lot of spies in the Renaissance period, right? And what they were up to, and they kind of prepare the way. The Venetians prepare the way.
I was going to say the Venice was a big foundation of a lot of those spies, funding a lot of those spies, especially with networks going into the East. What was going on?
Exactly, and also the Venetians kind of prepare the way model of running things. That prepares the way for the British Empire, I should say.
Yes, it does.
Yes, they do. Yeah.
And we got some stuff for you to listen to on the plane on the way over. If you're going to Venice, we got the Venetian Black Nobility set over here.
That is a good one.
It sets you up.
I will give them your information, Richard. I'm just joking. I'm not actually meeting any. I'm not actually meeting any Illuminists. But one other thing I want to mention too. This is a weird one. Here's a guy I had not heard of. He popped up as British intelligence connected guy. Basically, the brains behind the World Council of Churches was this guy named Wysert Hooft, who I'm guessing is like a Dutch or Danish name, that weird of a name. But he was basically they took a British intelligence guy to create a World Council of Churches. Which is interesting. That's in the Ratio book, Milner Fabian Conspiracy.
Oh, for sure.
In response to some ideas that the British in the 19th century, through the State Department, were creating some. What do we call this, sort of Protestant denominations within America and also in Europe, to undermine sort of dogma associated with Catholic Church and also just the general foundations of Christianity itself.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
I forget the connections like off the top. I have to go research it again. But there's interesting when we think about Mormon Church, but there's a whole host of other ones.
Well, the Mormons,
The Church of Latter-day Saints. That's Freemasonry. Like
Jehovah's
it seemed like
Witness,
they had
Freemasonry.
6
There's a
degrees
whole
of
bunch of those.
separation to British intelligence, but this was like before the instantiation of MI5, MI6.
Yeah, they just had the
down.
East India Company.
Right. It was just the East. Right. It was like the remnants of that essentially, and so it was an interesting argument because it did strike a bell, ring a bell in regards to when you think about Palmerston Zoo and the infiltration of young movements around that same time. That was also a British development. So it's like you prop up the ideological sort of the romantic ideations of the youth and weaponize it against the various kingdoms.
So it's like
that
the Young
exist.
Turks, the
It's
Young
no different with the
Americans.
religion. Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's like the
Young
woke people
Italians.
now.
Yeah,
Now,
it's
when
like
he
the-
says,
the woke,
Yeah,
the
it
Maoists, you got to erase everything that came before, right?
when Tony says Lord Palmerston Zoo, do you know what he's talking about?
So, I mean, there's a lot of information to unpack there, and it's kind of getting into how the religious organizations can influence society, and this whole intelligence being wrapped up in the whole thing. So I'm going to bring up some of the book references that they're talking about in this. The main topic of the podcast there was this coming from this book with Operation Gladio.
Okay.
The alliance between the Vatican, the CIA, and the mafia. And some of these books to go and buy these books. Some of these are pretty pricey. So
Yeah, I just found that on Amazon, so I'll probably have to read that.
yeah, so Operation Gladio is a lot of what we're talking about there early on. They're also getting into One Nation Under Blackmail, where they're talking about the BCCI, the Bank of Credit and Commerce International. And Whitney Webb kind of goes over how they use BCCI to funnel a lot of the money, and a lot of the things that they were doing with Epstein was a part. BCCI played a big role in that. Getting into the World Council of Churches and the reference for that. That is this book, The Milner-Fabian Conspiracy here. This one definitely is one of the more pricey of the books. Milner-Fabian Conspiracy was written as a sequel to Carol Quigley's The Anglo-American Establishment in Rose Martin's Fabian Freeway. As such, it provides a critical study of the Milner Group and the Fabian Society, two closely related organizations set up in the late 1800s by banking and industrial interests for the purpose of subverting the existing order and establishing a socialist world government controlled by themselves. So he mentioned one of the guys that was instrumental in the creation of the World Council of Churches as this guy, Visser Hooft, was tied in with the British intelligence. He's a Dutch theologian and clergyman who served as the first general secretary of the World Council of Churches from 1948 to 1966. Appointed to the position in 1938 despite reservations about his age, instrumental in organizing the World Council of Churches Provisional Committee and maintaining communication between churches during World War II. Under his leadership, the World Council of Churches was officially constituted in 1948 in its first assembly in Amsterdam, bringing together 147 Protestant and Orthodox churches from 44 countries. The council, through its formative years, expanding its membership to nearly 300 churches across more than 100 countries and advocating for the inclusion of churches from communist nations, Africa, and Asia. Also worked to strengthen ties with the Eastern Orthodox churches, facilitating their entry into the World Council of Churches in 1962. Although his efforts to include the Roman Catholic Church were unsuccessful, he maintained dialogue with the ecumenical elements within it. Mr. Hooft is recognized with numerous awards. Blah, blah, blah. Retired in 1966, remained an influential figure in the ecumenical movement until his death, July 4th, 1985, in Geneva, Switzerland. So yeah, this whole thing is kind of seems like a way to tie together a lot of these Protestant churches into this overall kind of idea of global government kind of situation.
Yeah, so maybe we can start to tie this together and kind of lead into the overall topic for today's show is Council of World Churches, and basically it's a supranational entity, right? Maybe could technically be defined as an NGO, non-governmental organization, right? And if I'm understanding this correctly, is at its core, if I can oversimplify just a little bit, it's there to engage in social engineering, but on one of the most ubiquitous scales that we are faced with. Would you say that's a pretty fair simplification of what they're trying to do?
From what I gather, it's just a way of kind of a soft power influence into steering society and social engineering. What would be interesting, at the conclusion of this is to see, if anybody out there is there would be, if whatever church you attend or whatever, if the pastor or the leader of the church may be involved in the World Council of Churches in some way. That'd be an interesting thing to learn about.
I'm not a churchgoer, but back in New Jersey, my parents attended a certain denomination in a certain city, and I think the main minister there came out is openly gay, and it was interesting to see the split that created, not only in the congregation of that specific church, that congregation, but also to see that the split that started to create within that denomination. And it was interesting because from what I can see with World Council of Churches, what they're trying to do is leverage existing social structures that are already out there, right, for the purpose of social engineering. And yet, in some ways, in doing that, what they end up doing is kind of shooting themselves in the foot, for good or for bad, and demolishing some of these denominations. So this particular one, where there's so much controversy, and I'm going to go so far as to say as some animosity, some infighting that went on in this particular denomination around allowing people who identify, they just come out and say, yeah, I'm gay, I'm bisexual. And that created a lot of problems. And, not only did attendance at that specific church, for that congregation go down dramatically, but I think many people started to leave that specific denomination. And it was It's kind of interesting to watch that, and it made me wonder, now that you're kind of bringing a lot of this up, was that the intended result, or was that just an outcome, a knock-on effect of all this? And that specific denomination that I'm referring to, from what little I understand about the World Council of Churches, this denomination definitely has leanings towards what the World Council of Churches is actively promoting, in terms of modern day contemporary liberalism or progressivism.
Yeah. And the people that got it started going with another instrumental character in this, you can just kind of look at the people that were involved in one of the other guys that was involved was John Foster Dulles, who was tied in with the early OSS and the formation of the CIA and everything. So John Foster Dulles was involved in the World Council of Churches. He attended the founding conference in 1948, where he had a confrontation with a Czech professor over Christian attitudes towards communism, emphasizing sanctity of individual freedom and supremacy of moral law over man-made law. Dulles was deeply involved in ecumenical efforts, having been influenced by his religious background and connections, including his family minister, Roswell Barnes, a leader of the movement that led to the creation of the WCC. He did not found the WCC. His involvement with the Federal Council of Churches positioned him as a key figure in linking Protestant activism with international political goals. He chaired the FCC's Commission on a Just and Durable Peace, established in 1940, which called for a new world order based on international cooperation, arms control, and the limitation of national sovereignty. The Commission's 1943 publication, The Six Pillars of Peace, reflected his vision for a post-war world shaped by collective security, global institutions, and a vision aligned with the ecumenical movement's goals. Dulles advocated for world government and believed that churches should be motivated to support global unity, even suggesting in 1937 that the solution lay in the abolition of the entire concept of national sovereignty and the unification of the world into a single nation. His efforts were part of a broader push to align religious values with internationalist policies and work closely with other prominent church leaders such as Reinhold Niebuhr and John C. Bennett, who were also involved in the WCC. The WCC, officially formed in 1948, received funding from major foundations like Rockefeller and Carnegie, and Dulles, who was a trustee of the Rockefeller Foundation and involved with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, was well connected with these networks, while some conservative Christian groups like the American Council of Christian Churches criticized him and the WCC as promoting world socialism and undermining free market capitalism. Dulles remained a central figure in the liberal Protestant push for global peace and unity through institutional cooperation.
It's so interesting to read this and see this, coming together like this. And then we compare and contrast a few, major periods. So there's the Great Schism, and I think that was in 11th century CE/AD. And that was basically a split between the Roman Catholic Church and the Catholic papacy. I hope I've got that correct. There was so much of the Dark Ages had so much to do with, basically massive fighting between the denominations. We had King Henry VIII, creating the Church of England as a mechanism and an excuse for him to get a divorce. We had I think it was the 30 Years' War. We had the War of the Roses. And there was Cromwell who led the Roundheads, I think it was. And so much of this was religious based. And it's interesting that these, just within Christianity alone, there's these massive amount of infighting going on between the denominations. And now there's this major shift in the exact opposite direction to bring Lutheranism, Protestantism, Methodism, Catholicism, at least an attempt to bring Catholicism into the fold, if you will. And, as an outsider, I look at that and I kind of chuckle because, for right or wrong, these denominations had major philosophical differences in terms of their traditions and interpretations of the Bible. And that's what caused a lot of this. I mean, yes, there's some politics going on there, but in terms of, if you ask people who are involved, why did this happen? They talk about major philosophical differences between the denominations. And yet somehow that all just goes away with the WCC. How does that happen?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a push to get everybody to unify all these different Protestant denominations.
Yeah.
And seemingly towards a singular goal of kind of a world socialism kind of agenda. And
Sorry, I'm trying to pull up the IG video for today's intermission, so I think you're gonna like it. Sorry.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just really interesting, man, and it seems like it would just be one thing as just to kind of see, because I know of a lot of talks that I've had with some friends that had grew up in different denominations that there it always seemed like there's this kind of version of the faith that is taught where it's kind of like a really passive type thing,
Yeah.
where you're not supposed to really, you're supposed to kind of follow authority,
Yeah.
and just kind of go along with things, whereas it seems there's got to be something else in the background that's maybe influencing that, because if you look at the story, it very much seems, the story of Jesus in the Bible, it very much seems like, he was very anti-authority of the time and things like that. So where does this kind of viewpoint come from, and like how are people being shaped? And it's always been kind of like something that I've seen as well, is where especially the men in the churches, it seems like you're kind of taught to be kind of hold a passive role.
So if I could take that and maybe add to it, so I could definitely see that, but I think it's done from a hierarchical point of view. Is those who are in the lower stratum are there to take a passive role, to do as they're told, and those who are in the higher echelon, leadership roles, they're there to set the tone, set the direction, and kind of give the orders to the lower strata.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a very oversimplified and quite possibly very wrong view.
Yeah. I don't know, but yeah, it's just interesting getting into the history of this whole formation of the WCC, and what its influences are on society, and how they may be influencing things on a larger scale with the churches across the country. And I know there is a difference, like, and this may be totally unrelated, but the tax status of a lot of churches, with
Yep.
being a 501c3 organization,
Charitable organizations.
yeah, being a charitable organization, and what that entails as far as like being able to receive funds, especially from the government, and how that might hold influence over those churches. And we looked at what happened during the whole COVID thing, like all these churches shut down and kind of in lockstep with the government.
Yeah.
And it was almost like they were directly in line following orders, along with the government. So
to add to that, we have some of these mega churches that, if we look at the way that they are run, operationally speaking, they're not that far from a profitable business, right? And Joel Osteen kind of comes to mind with this sort of thing, and especially with the tax status. And this is nothing new, right? And when I was a kid, there was Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They ran their scam, right? And this goes back decades. And these are people who just kind of find a way to thread that tax revenue and regulatory and legal needle all the way through, and they're able to extract funds out of these givings, and it's so bad that there was a comedy series called The Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for anyone who's interested, by the way, they're not making fun of Christianity. They're not making fun of Christians. They're making fun of these hucksters. All right. So I just want to put that out there. If anything, I think they're actually quite charitable towards Christians in terms of like true Christians want to be charitable people. But the show is so offensive. I can't go more than 15 seconds without busting out laughing. There are basically 4 or 5 main characters, and they all do such a good job. John Goodman's in there. He's a great comedic actor. The guy from Eastbound and Down, he's in there. One of the guys from Workaholics is in there. And there's a lady I never seen before, but she did a great job. Just the whole cast. And the story arc was great. I've only seen 3 seasons. I think the 4th season just came out. So I'm looking forward to watching it. But if you want to see that, and they run a mega church. And they're extracting funds out of that revenue flow, donation flow.
Yeah, and not like I see the benefit of community in the churches, but it's very much like a lot of these institutions can be ways that are influencing you subtly. So if you're aware of it, then you can protect yourself from some of the things that might be coming into you from these institutions. And definitely, like you're talking about, like the thing that came to mind when you're talking about the televangelists and people like that was Kenneth Copeland, when he like just flipped out on this interviewer when he was asking him about his like private jet or whatever.
Yeah.
I have this little
want to fly commercial so that you can fly in luxury. How much money did you pay for Tyler Perry's Gulfstream jet, for example?
Well, for example, that's really none of your business, but
Isn't it the business of your donors?
listen, I paid. You kind of caught me off guard here. Okay. Thank you, Lord. Help me. Just let me pray.
Well, let me just ask you a simple question. A lot of people think I'm becoming for a preacher to live a life of luxury and to fly around in private jets. What's your response to that?
Very simple. It takes a lot of money to do what we do. Without the airplane that we have that I bought from Tyler Perry, and I didn't pay anywhere. And Tyler's one of the greatest guys. He made that airplane so cheap for me, I couldn't help but buy it.
Well, my question then, okay, all right, but I want to get to the demons because people are very concerned about that comment.
Give me a chance to go inside of this. I love your eyes.
Again, getting back to the comment, you said that you don't like the fly commercial because you don't want to get into food with a bunch of demons. Do you really believe that human beings are demons?
Oh, I do not. And don't you ever say I did. We wrestle not with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers.
Can you explain what?
It's just like, the way he just goes like full on, like, whoa.
That's right out of a comedy show right there. and one of the best, you're kind of doing with the thing with the eyes. One of the best descriptions I've ever heard is you can tell their nervous system is really activated when you can see all four sides of their eyes. I'm sorry, you can see the whites on all four sides of the irises.
Hey, Alabama, how in the world are you old enough to remember the Bakers?
Well, Alabama, how old do you think I am? Put that in the chat first, and then I'll tell you how I know about the Bakers. By the way, I wasn't around for World War II, but I know about OSS and SOE and CIC. But yes, I was around for the Bakers. I think I was roughly 13 years old when they were hitting the big time. And what's funny is with them, 30 years old. You're very kind. I'll give you your tip later on. I am 53. So, and also there was the lady who was Jim Baker's assistant, and she was in Playboy. Jessica Hahn. She did a spread for Playboy, and she went on to do a lot of work. Different types of work, and she was on the Howard Stern show quite a bit. And so Howard Stern,
Life of a Televangelist or something like that.
So basically, Tammy Faye Baker was Jim Baker's wife, but then Jessica Hahn was almost like his personal assistant or something like that. And they were involved. Now, if you read the interview, she claims that she was SA'd by Jim. Never any evidence. And in my humble opinion, the story just had too many inconsistencies in there for it to fit. If I had to guess, she was basically looking to hitch a wagon to Jim in some way, shape, or form, right? To kind of move up his power stack right there. And when that whole thing blew up, she went to the next thing, which is Playboy, and the next thing after that, which is hitching a wagon to Howard Stern. And so she was very, very adept. She knew how to kind of leverage the next thing, and she did very well for many years in doing that. And she made a good living doing that.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm sure the WCC would love to get their hands on her. No, but I'm 53, so that's why I know a lot. I saw that stuff directly. And so what's funny is Tammy Faye. So SNL did a skit on her, and she was a master of being able to cry on command. And so she put really heavy makeup on, especially mascara and eyeliner, and she could cry, and she would get that mascara running down her cheeks. And so SNL did a great spoof on her, and they just had like a waterfall coming down her face. It was just great. And
is it church chat? Jim
I don't remember.
Faye Baker.
Yeah, that may have been it. Tammy Faye T-shirt. I don't remember the Tammy Faye T-shirt. You may have to fill us in there, Alabama. That's pretty good. Wow, that's you're forced me to kind of go back into the cobwebs in my mind here. So it was interesting because I think that when Jim and Tammy Faye met, they went on a date and they were literally married, I think 1 or 2 weeks later. And I think they had figured each other out pretty well. I think they figured out what the formula was, and they went on a tear on their evangelism, and it was you really just, they could have given a masterclass on hucksterism.
Yeah, I mean, I I grew up in the Catholic Church, but yeah, I did attend one of these like big churches in Orlando at one point in time, and I just remember like going to the service and then leaving it. It was like a survey card, like how was your spiritual experience or whatever.
That's great.
What was your like
That's
church
great.
experience for this? And I was like, wow, this is like
That's the Mark Deming School of Management. If you don't measure it, you can't improve it.
so it's like very much like run like a business.
Yeah. It was her makeup and face, and it said, "I ran into Tammy Faye at the mall." That's great. That's great. I wonder what the markups were on those T-shirts. And I wonder, I bet you they had a whole licensing schema around that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were pioneers in their own right. There had been, televangelists before, but they were kind of limited to just the Southeast. But Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, they really broke under the scene across the nation, and they did a good job. I'd say the one that broke ground before them was the 700 Club. They did a really good job, the 700 Club. And that was kind of interesting to see that. I remember them as a kid. But Jim and Tammy Faye, they really did a great job of really amping up the energy. Jimmy Swaggart, that's right. Yeah, good memory, man. Jimmy Swaggart. Yeah, if I remember correctly, there was some real controversy, like true legal controversy with Jimmy Swaggart. And I apologize if I have that wrong. Jimmy Swaggart, there was another guy. Yeah, I can't remember his name, but yeah, that was a good call out. Good memory.
Yeah, I don't. The coverage of this is like, seems like we're kind of trashing on the churches, and I do think that you get, like I said, you get some good things out of it with community and people that are trying to do good and all that. But there definitely are a bunch of them, like we're talking about, where they're just kind of like policing the people that are in those churches and stuff. That are they really?
Hey, Alabama wrote in here, "I wish my mom had the money back she sent to those people." That's right. Oral Roberts. That's right. That's another one. He was another televangelist. So what's funny is you're talking about, I wish my mom had the money back she sent to those people. So the super group of Temple the Dog was comprised of Pearl Jam and Soundgarden, and they had a great song. So the album they put out was just great, just wonderful grunge music. They had a really good song called Wooden Jesus. And the lyrics, if you really read the lyrics, they are cutting. They cut deep. And there's a lot of sarcasm. And I think Chris Cornell was the vocalist in there. And just that typical Cornell, his voice can just project and cut. And he did a great job on that. But yeah, Wooden Jesus, it really exposed a lot. And I think that album came out in 93, if I'm not mistaken. So, and that was kind of the when a lot of that stuff had come to a head and blown off.
Yeah, I have another song reference from there's this one band. They're kind of like a bluegrass punk band. They're called The Devil Makes Three, but they have a song. They call that Religion, and one of their lyrics is like, L. Ron Hubbard had a science of a different kind. Follow me, move stars, move objects with your mind, and then it just goes like, they call that religion, but they going to hell when they die.
That's great. So I used to work at Holland America Lines in Seattle, and that was pretty cool company to work for. So they're a cruise line, and they were in downtown Seattle. Great part of Seattle to work in, and literally right across the street was a massive Scientology building. And we used to, we would take a break for like 10 minutes just to kind of unwind. And we would look, and it was always fun to watch the Scientology people coming out from the store, the bookstore and stuff like that, come out, taking a smoke break and then going back in. And we always thought that was rather ironic.
Yeah, the Scientology thing is pretty wild, man.
Yeah.
That I watched that documentary Going Clear, where they talked about the Leah Remini, I think the King of Queens. She was like one of the big features, I think, in that documentary. But going into how they like keep paying to kind of keep going up and up and into the thing, and you keep taking these different classes.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Personal self-development, and then you figure out that everybody's like fell into some volcano thetans or something like that.
Yeah, Thetan sevens. And I think when she got out was right after Tom Cruise was really kind of going up, and she was, I think, justifiably irritated because, and she talks a lot about this to Howard Stern. She was justifiably irritated because she's like, I'm putting work and time into this, and a lot of other people are putting work and time into this, and they just promote Tom Cruise right up the ranks to he's a freaking Thetan 7. And it was interesting because it was like Tom Cruise is using Scientology and Scientology is using Tom Cruise, and it was this mutual appreciation society between the two of them. And it was real interesting. And no one talks about that Tom Cruise, I don't know if he's still with the Church of Scientology, but there was that whole thing, and he went up to Thetan 1 and Thetan 2 and just kind of went up the ranks so quickly. And this was also right around the time, I think, when he was married to Katie Holmes, and just all this just kind of ridiculous behavior on his part. And nobody mentions that stuff anymore.
Yeah, man, it's kind of a wild world we live in, for sure.
Yeah.
Let me see. One of those other references in there I can pull up here that they were talking about earlier. Was this book by David Wim Hof here? Let's see. Pull that up real quick here. This book here, John Courtney Murray, Time, Life, and the American Proposition: How the CIA's Doctrinal Warfare Program Changed the Catholic Church. You've referenced this before. 1941, Franklin D. Roosevelt gave his famous Four Freedoms speech. In that speech,
Yeah, that's right.
Set forth a vision of re-engineering societies around the globe. This means the means was psychological warfare involving the manipulation of ideas, words, and symbols to divide target societies and convince these societies of the ideology that formed America. The most important society America targeted was the Roman Catholic Church.
Yep.
So the struggle reached its culmination at the Second Vatican Council with the promulgation of the document Declaration on Religious Liberty. Catholic doctrine did not change, but defeated at the council. The Americanists used their media power to win the battle over who got to interpret the council, with significant consequences for both the world and the Catholic Church. Whose leadership came to espouse the doctrines of liberalism, something its leadership had condemned just a few years earlier. I know, I was being raised Catholic and all that stuff. I was, raised in the post-Vatican II era of things, and just from my experience in the church, it very much seemed like the liberalism found its way in there for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an accurate description. And we take a look at was it the current Pope or the previous one, where he was promoting quite a bit of contemporary liberalism / progressive, talking points and agenda, And I think a lot of people in the Catholic Church and even outside of the Catholic Church were really put off by that, really irritated by that, because and I'm not judging one with the other, right? But I'm just kind of pointing out that when these institutions get away from their core ideas, they definitely drive off a lot of their core supporters, core believers. And I think the Catholic Church really suffered quite a bit because of the way that either the current or the previous Pope, just embrace some of these progressive and liberal ideas, socialist ideas.
Well, yeah, like they were talking about the earliest spy organizations, where they reference the longest intelligence organization is the Vatican. And and so, you get people going in to confess to the priests, so that's a great way to gather intelligence right there.
Yeah, you could do it. That's right. At the priest level, and then technically even below the priest level, right, where you have whether it be I'm just loosely use the term assistants to the priests, right? Parishioners,
there's like
right, members of the deacons, exactly. And you have this informal spy network that can all just roll up. And then also information, disinformation, malinformation, misinformation can roll down as well. And this kind of gets into what I think is at the heart of a lot of this, and how the WCC and some of these other types of organizations can persist and thrive for so long, is because so many people accept and promote bad philosophy. And when I talk about philosophy, I'm talking about some of the 4 or 5 major pillars of philosophy, that being metaphysics, logic, epistemology, ethics, right? And when we do that, when we don't have a solid foundation of philosophy, we can have almost anything sold to us and we'll just accept it. And we can kind of build this hodgepodge of a topology of philosophy that is very inconsistent, but somehow in our heads we can force jam it together. And it's really rare to find a person or any organization that has a consistent, internally and externally consistent philosophy that touches on those 4 major pillars right there of philosophy. So it's sad that as humans, yes, we're imperfect, and as a result, we allow bad philosophy to infiltrate our lives. And I think we're seeing the effects of that in the political realm, the religious realm, financial realm, economic realm. It's sad, and we're all paying the price for it.
Yeah, I mean, like you're saying, yeah, you have to practice, your mental self-defense, and that comes with looking into things and asking questions and attempting to get to the root of the matter of a lot of things. And I can see where people are looking for answers, right? They're looking for answers on a lot of things, and you can fall into something, especially if people are quite charismatic and able to kind of sway you in one direction, or and maybe give you an offer of something that may seem like it's really really positive, but may be kind of serving you or leading you in a bad direction underneath the surface.
Yeah. And I think that tribalism is such a deep driving force with us, because from a biological, from a evolutionary point of view, there is huge advantage to being tribal, right? To be able to cluster together. If you think about it, is that any different than the comparative advantage that clusters of cells can create, right? By creating more complex organisms. And, we can get complex societies by clustering together and creating these tribal effects. And it's so deep inside of us that we have this yearning to be social. We are social creatures, right? We have this yearning to be connected with others. And many times we will sacrifice integrity. We will sacrifice philosophy and intellect in order to either create or just maintain those connections with other people. And I think that's how strong those biological, chromosomal, and genetic drives really are within us. They create kind of a deep yearning within all of us.
And I got a good book recently talking about it's to see the cage is to leave it, is a book that was written by this guy Etienne de Boete Squared. So it's kind of a reference to Etienne de Boete, who was like a French anarchist kind of guy. And he's kind of that's his pen name, but he goes into a lot of how the media is used to anchor symbols of like the flag and relate the state to in replace of religion. And so now the state becomes, your the state is in the place of God, basically.
Yeah.
So he was recently on the Higher Side Chats, and that was a really good podcast interview and going into his book.
Well, we talked about that. I've referenced this a couple of times. I think with the book "Ominous Parallels" by Leonard Peikoff, I think it was, came out in 1984. And to amplify your point, he talked about the idea that what some of these Axis power leaders promoted was the idea of the superorganism called the state, and it has its own. It is a living entity. It has its own will, has its own mind, and the more people there are within the state, the bigger the superorganism becomes. And people like Hitler gave himself an special power by saying only a few of us can discern the will of the state. And if you think about it, it's kind of like the Jedi in Star Wars, right? Only the Jedi had the ability to discern the will of the Force, and obviously it's not the same thing, but I think that kind of amplifies, some of what you're talking about is this idea of the state being some superorganism here.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get into some of this here. And here, let's see. I think I can maybe find the section that he kind of gives you a meme and a visual. And this is a lot of like how the book is laid out, is to give you kind of some visuals to make the comparison. So he says, like, God is the state, prophets are the politicians, idols are the flags, commandments are laws, praying and voting, tithing, taxes.
Yeah,
making those comparisons with religion to kind of show that a lot of the media and that we have is making a lot of these things, you can compare them to religious ideals.
To add to that, they, in many religions, they will say, and this is especially with Catholicism, is there are only certain designated people who can divine to divinate the will of the God, right? So the Pope is the apex, interpreter of what God wants, right? And same thing with those in politics, or the bureaucrats and the politicians. They are the ones who can properly interpret what the state really wants, and it's interesting to kind of see that. I think there's one area where I think the analogy falls apart. Are you able to go back to that side by side comparison real quick?
Yeah.
There's one area where it falls apart, at least with tithing in Christianity, as far as I know. Tithing is 10%. It's a flat 10%. Whereas with taxes, it's progressive taxes. The percentage goes up the more you make.
Yeah. So it's not total equivalence there, but
also I do like the title, "To See the Cage is to Leave It," is in a way that's the modern version of the allegory of the cave, Plato's allegory of the cave, right? Is the Plato being able to run out of the cave is him seeing how confining the cave was, and then also see sunlight for what it truly is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He took the red pill.
Yeah. You did have one of the logical fallacies that you sent me. If you want to talk about that.
Yeah. So reification. This is an interesting one because misplaced concreteness, concretism, excessive concretism. It's basically taking something that is a model, it's an idea, and trying to say that it actually exists. So, here's kind of a humorous one is if I were to say, he has a magnetic personality, and then, to use excessive reification, say, if he has a magnetic personality, he can attract, iron or steel to himself. Well, the magnetic aspect is just an analogy, right? And I think so here's a good example of excessive concreteness is states or countries. Countries and governments are just models. In the same way, by the way, money is just a model, right? When people, and I've gotten a lot of debates with people about this, civil debates with people about this, and I ask them, do states exist? Do countries exist? And they say, well, yeah, of course. And I said, okay, cool. Break off a piece of the United States for me. Help me touch the United States. And then they'll say, well, that building is the United States building, or that car is a federal vehicle. I say, okay, that's fine. But that car can be bought and sold. That building can be bought and sold. It can be leased. Does that mean that the United States can buy and sell parts of itself to others? And they kind of look at me like I got two heads coming out of my shoulders. And they realize when I put it like that it is an absurdity. What I'm saying, that you can buy and sell parts of the United States, but they don't take it the rest of the way, which is there is no such thing as the United States. There is no such thing as the United States Army. These are just models, And when we talk with each other in language, all language is a lie. It's just ideally, the lie is pretty close to the truth, and we use language as shorthand to describe things. And so when we say, the army is here, or the federal government is coming down on these criminals, that's just an expression, right? To try to convey an idea. But there is no federal government, right? There is no Catholic Church. There's just a bunch of people who kind of act basically in lockstep with each other. And I think that's something that trips people up quite a bit, is the reification fallacy, is that excessive concreteness. And we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble, because instead of seeing these things for what they are, they're just models, right? And we're all trying to play basically by the same rules in the model. They will start to say, well, the United States actually exists, and we have to do what the United States says. We have to do what the federal government says. And the federal government exists no further than the paper it was written on, or the parchment that it was written on, And I think that this is again, part of bad philosophy, right? We have about 300 logical fallacies that are out there. And this is one of the major ones that people buy into. Here's another one. I was watching a YouTube show, and it was a call-in episode, and the caller was talking about the idea of numbers or code, like programming code. And he said, what is it that infuses meaning? What infuses data into the code? And the host had to say, okay, I have to reject that. There's no infusing meaning. There's no infusing data into the code. We interpret the code. We interpret the symbols that we call code in there. And I think it's not quite reification, but it's kind of parallel to that. Is people think that there is that when we infuse meaning, we infuse information into code, that makes it more legit, And we could say the same thing about that chart you had, where you had the flag, the flag is America. The flag represents America. No, it's just a cloth, right? It happens to be something that I love, right? But I also recognize what it is. It's a model. It's a representation, And I think a lot of people get themselves into real trouble by using the reification fallacy, and they don't know that they're doing that. And they ascribe a lot of characteristics to these artificial things, these models, and somehow think that they must then obey that model, for whatever reason. Or even worse, that model has imbued them with certain edicts, certain directives, and they are required to go out and follow the directive of this thing called the United States. And some people would say, oh, I'm justified in engaging in assassinations. I'm justified in conscripting people and make them go to war, because that's what the United States wants. And I think we get ourselves in a lot of trouble when we go to that level of reification.
Yeah. And it starts early, though.
It does.
The whole thing with the flag, and what Etienne talks about, especially in that book, is how the flag is used in a lot of the movies and, in sports and
propaganda. It's just propaganda
all over the place. And especially in moments of high emotional payoff. So like the hero wins, you got the flag in the background, and he calls it a technique called anchoring, so that you associate that positive emotion with the symbol, with the flag itself. And so, when you see a lot of this and you start getting reinforced with those emotions, that people hold that symbol with that positive emotion.
Yeah.
And so, it gets that in your mind. And if you see anybody like messing with the flag or anything like that, then they're going to have a reaction, because it's holding such a place of positive emotion with them.
It is. One very specific one that I think we can all relate to is the raising of the flag in Iwo Jima, right? When you had those Marines, there were seven Marines. They planted that flag and they hoisted it together. That can bring out a lot of emotion. I get a little choked up when I think about it. When I was in basic training, they're engaged in sleep deprivation and energy deprivation. And we had gone through, a couple weeks of indoctrination, and, they played proud to be an American, and they knew when to hit us with that. And a lot of us got pretty choked up with that, because it's not the same as prison, but it kind of feels like prison because they had stripped away so many of our, liberties, if you will, voluntarily. And so it wasn't as bad as prison, but I think a lot of us had a much greater appreciation for the liberties that are guaranteed by the Constitution. And they played that song and they put the flag up, and a lot of us got pretty choked up. And it really goes to what you're saying, Greg, is they know how to use the symbol to get us in a very emotionally intense and wound up period.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that you were mentioning when you were talking about this idea of reification and is the No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority by Lysander Spooner. And that book, it kind of goes into that we all agree on a certain rule set, and so really the Constitution doesn't really so here's a quote from it. But whether the Constitution really being one thing or another, this much is certain, that it is either authorized such a government as we have had, or has been powerless to prevent it. In either case, it is unfit to exist. And one of the arguments that he lays forward is that, these agreements were, if you could bind people to something, it's like a contract between those people that were there at the signing of it, that agreed to those certain terms. Where we're born into it doesn't necessarily mean that we're agreeing to those terms. Although, our Constitution has a lot of really good stuff in it, and that gives, lays out a lot of the things that we have inalienable rights, and these rights can't be taken away from us, and they're endowed by our Creator. And those are really new things in the whole spectrum of humanity.
That's right. Yeah, they did such a good job of, and I think Thomas Paine, really pioneered a lot of this thinking. Jefferson pioneered a lot of thinking around this, is the idea that the individual has primacy here, right? Not the nation state, not the church, and we could almost divide the entire political spectrum into this whole idea of tribalism versus individualism. And I think the Constitution takes the correct viewpoint that, and the only logical viewpoint, that we have to start with the individual has primacy there. And since the individual has primacy, we also have rights. And if we define rights, I define rights. My working definition of rights is the potential, but not the obligation, for any action such that one does not cause unsolicited harm to another. That's how I define a right. And if we go with that kind of basic axiom, actually those two basic axioms, then we can kind of derive everything else, and that we see in the Constitution. And so I don't know if you can search for this, Greg, but Barack Obama talks about, and I think there's video out there where he talks about the concept that the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. And so if you look at the full quote, I actually agree with the first part of the quote. I don't like the way he phrases it, but I do agree with the first part of the quote. It's the second part that he's just philosophically wrong and evil. And he talks about the first part of the quote is basically, it defines what the government cannot do, right? Which is government has zero rights. Okay. And then he says, but it never talks about those things that the government must do for the people, and he leaves it very vague, and thus it gives them a whole lot of latitude to say, well, the government must provide healthcare, government must provide protection, right? The four freedoms, right, that FDR talks about. And again, this gets into the whole concept of bad philosophy. And he completely obliterates, by talking about this whole concept of the Charter of Mega Liberties, he completely obliterates the concept of primacy of the individual and rights of the individual. Basically, the government can come along, reification, right? Government can come along and take things from some people because they have the moral obligation to give them up, and government is the only entity that can be the final arbiter, the proper arbiter of the takings and the final arbiter of the givings of those things, whatever that may be: education, food, clothing, housing, healthcare, whatever that is, stocks, right? And this is the sort of thing that is so easy for people to fall into these traps, these philosophical traps, because when he talks like this, it is really easy. It is seductive, and he was a good speaker, and it's very seductive to fall in these traps. Like, yeah, that's right. Government has the positive responsibility to do things on behalf of the people, but by definition, by observation, description, governments don't exist. The only thing we can do is one set of people can take from another set of people and give to a third set of people. That's the only thing that's there, because government doesn't actually exist. And that's part of the reification fallacy.
Yeah, it's just an idea. It's like like you said, with money as well, is really can be boiled down to an idea of that people have generated so that we can, exchange value with each other.
Yeah.
Figure out some type of mechanism that we can use to exchange value with each other.
Yeah.
So, really it is a generation of human minds to say, this thing, we're giving this thing, this entity, or this thing that we call government, some type of authority in order to organize ourselves. But that's all it is an idea.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah, in my blog, I have my opening series. It's on bitcoinandpeace.com. And it's a very rough website, but if you want to read the opening series, it's there, bitcoinandpeace.com. And I talk about this idea that, for truly civil society, there are four pillars. There's written language, there's money, the rule of law, and civics. And you take away any one of those things, and that civil society just collapses. It may not be immediate. It may take decades for that to happen. But here's the funny thing about it. All four of those things are just models. They're just concepts. They're just ideas. None of them exist. And yet they are the pillars of, I think if you go to, let's see now, if you go to the top, to the very top, I think.
Start here?
Yeah, I think start here. No, I'll see if I can find it for you. But basically, can you go to the blog in the upper right hand corner?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll see if I can send you the link. But basically, all those things that I talked about, those four pillars, they're all abstractions. They're models, and the only way that a civil society can exist and thrive and persist is by the observation of those four things, which, if you think about it, yes, there are first principle drivers behind all of them, but in a way that there's kind of some rules that we all kind of agree to honor and to observe. And the moment one person starts to deviate from those rules or first principles, et cetera, those values, is the moment that, we start to move away from a civil society.
Yeah. And I would just say that we're coming up on a time where people we have to figure out how to, if we don't want to fall into a lot of this with the dictates that are coming down and all the stuff that's rolling out, that we've got to figure out how to create something in parallel and build something in parallel to that, so that we don't have to follow along with it. And that comes with having the personal responsibility. If you want to remain free, that you have to take a lot of personal responsibility on, and be able to move yourself to operate more autonomously in the world.
Yeah.
So
I think as well said. Glenn Beck has said many times, if we want government to do less, we have to be willing to do more, as individuals. And I totally agree with him, because the moment that we step back, we abdicate our personal responsibility, personal authority, then government, that model, that reification is going to step in. There are plenty of politicians and bureaucrats who are more than happy to fill up that power vacuum, and, to paraphrase, so the original statement is, you may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you. You may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. And it sucks. It really sucks that we have to be eternally vigilant, but that truly is the price for freedom, for individual liberty.
Yep. So Jay, where can we're gonna wrap it up for tonight?
Yeah.
You got anything else that you want to present?
Yeah. So I mentioned bitcoinandpeace.com. I apologize for the very rough view. I'm slowly putting it together, and thank goodness for ChatGPT or Grok is helping me, put that all together. So I'm really impressed with the LLMs that are out there. But Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee on meetup.com. Go to meetup.com, search for Bitcoin, Huntsville, crypto, and coffee. And we have a really good group of people where we meet 2 times a month, 4th Wednesday and 4th Saturday of the month typically, but because the holidays, we're going to be the 3rd Wednesday, 3rd Saturday of the month. We're not selling anything. All we want to do is help people understand what Bitcoin is, understand how Bitcoin works, and understand how to make Bitcoin work for them. Ultimately, we want people to be comfortable with Bitcoin, because that's the only way people change is when the pain of moving over is less than the pain of staying in the current system, in the matrix, right? And you see the logo there is orange. It's kind of the popular thing in the Bitcoin world is take the orange pill. And obviously that's an homage to the matrix of taking the blue pill, taking the red pill. And you see just how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do. We have just a really group of people of all different ages and backgrounds and exposures to Bitcoin. Some people who are pure newbies, they've literally heard about Bitcoin. That's the entirety of the experience of Bitcoin. We have other people like me have a decent amount of experience. I've been in the Bitcoin realm since late 2012, early 2013. And so I love sharing what I know about Bitcoin and helping people establish good philosophy, helping people understand what is money, why is it so important, and what is good money, what is bad money, and then understanding that Bitcoin is actually the first true form of money we've ever had. And that is the way that we spit ourselves out of the system, because Bitcoin is completely orthogonal, completely independent of government.
Excellent, guys. Go join Jay's Bitcoin meetup group, and appreciate it as always, Jay. Really Really
Likewise,
appreciate
man.
you coming on and having a chat about these different issues. And folks, if you like this, join us every other Thursday for Truth Seeking Thursday. Subscribe, leave us a comment. Let us know, if you've ever run across anything with the World Council of Churches. And I hope it inspires you to maybe look into it a little further and a little deeper. And we'll catch you guys next time, and appreciate everybody for checking this out. And we'll see you on the next one.
Be well. Take care, everyone.